Less than 24 hours after David Petraeus announced that he would be testifying in Benghazi, the House Foreign Affairs Committee now says that Secretary Clinton will also testify as well. And by the way, you are looking at live pictures from Staten Island. The president will be speaking shortly. Amid escalating tensions over the Benghazi investigation, we are expecting that Secretary Clinton will also testify. Joining me now is Nicholas Burns, former State Department spokesman and former ambassador to NATO. And Nick, you know the drill. We may have to interrupt you if the president comes to the microphones there in Staten Island, where he is looking at the damage and the recovery efforts, of course. What is your takeaway from the controversy over Benghazi and over David Petraeus and his resignation, apparently under some pressure to resign as CIA director?
Well, Andrea, certainly Benghazi was a tragedy for the Foreign Service in the United States. There's a major security meltdown there, and obviously tough questions have to be asked, and they are being asked, and Secretary Clinton has convened an accountability review board, and she will testify once that review board has made its findings known to the administration. I think that's an orderly process, and it ought to go forward on that basis. Obviously, there are all sorts of congressional committees looking into that, and they have a right to do that, but I think we would be remiss if there was a rush to judgment. There's all sorts of accusations being made against the administration. Many of them I find to be very unfair. I think we all ought to wait until the facts are in before we begin to make judgments.
You know Susan Rice very well, our UN ambassador, and the line in the sand was drawn, and the president was very angry about what John McCain and Lindsey Graham said. What is the predicate for that? She has not even been nominated. There's not even clear that the decision has been made to nominate her for Secretary of State.
Well, Susan Rice is an outstanding person, and she has been a very effective ambassador to the UN, and I think it's unfair to hold her accountable when she was solely accountable, when she was articulating the views of the entire administration. And I know how this process works, and you do too. Before someone goes on those Sunday morning shows, all sorts of people get together and decide, you know, what is our best knowledge of what happened on issue X, Y, or Z, and she was simply articulating what the administration believed to be the truth at that time, 5 days after the attack on our consulate in Benghazi. So I do think it's unfair to hold her responsible for that, and she's an outstanding public servant, and she deserves to be treated, I think, in a much more honorable way.
And as people are being, invited, using the term loosely, up to the hill for all of these hearings, they sometimes feel like star chambers. The House Foreign Affairs Committee said that Secretary Clinton was going to testify. The word from the State Department is that that's not a done deal. But towards the end of this review board, clearly she will have to be up there to respond to all of it. But what is the internal dynamic inside the intelligence community now? You've had a CIA director who has been forced to resign over what he acknowledges were, personal misconduct. You now also have a four-star general leading the war in Afghanistan, nominated to be NATO Supreme Allied Commander, who was supposed to have his hearing today and now is not having his hearing because he has been sort of ensnared in the email chain, probably innocently, but there was enough there for the Defense Department to decide they needed a review. And there have been other issues with other generals in the chain of command. There does seem to be a feeling that there is something seriously amiss.
Well, obviously, some of these events that have been unearthed over the last week, it's a tragedy for the people involved. And I can tell you, Andrea, having served with the U.S. military, worked with the U.S. military for so many years, when I was ambassador to NATO, when I was ambassador to Greece, there are lots of great people in the military who are ready to lead us forward. And I think that we'll see that in the weeks and months ahead. And obviously, we've got to have our best people on the front lines, because we still have the war in Afghanistan. 68,000 American troops are still in Afghanistan, and we've got to have our best people on that. We obviously have to have our best people working on the Iran nuclear problem. So one of the tasks of any administration when they go through a transition, even a very friendly transition from a first to a second term, is to identify, in this case, military officers who can lead us forward, and there are plenty of good people who can do that.
And as a former ambassador to NATO, is there a reason, if all of this is cleared up, that General Allen could not be confirmed? There's some indications from the Pentagon that there's been so much controversy already that it would be, frankly, a diplomatic problem to put him forward.
My own view is that he's an outstanding officer. He has done, by all accounts, a very effective job in bringing us through this difficult phase of the Afghan war. And assuming that this is cleared up, I would hope very much that his appointment would be able to go forward. There's a tendency by the press, obviously, to focus on all of the aspects of this affair, but we have so many important issues ahead of us in American foreign policy, from the war to Iran to North Korea to the global economic crisis to the Eurodebt crisis to the Arab revolutions to securing our embassies. And one thing we haven't talked about, Andrea, is I hope that Congress will fully fund embassy security. That's kind of been lost in this debate about Benghazi. The real issues to me are, how do we strengthen security at our embassies? How do we get Republicans and Democrats to give full funding to secure our embassies and consulates? And then how do we go after the terrorist group in Libya that killed Ambassador Stevens and his 3 colleagues? Those, to me, are the real issues, and they tend to get lost as people hurl accusations. It's still a very partisan time in our country, unfortunately.
Thanks very much, Nick Burns. Thank you. And up next, Israel's ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren, joining us. This is Andrea Mitchell Reports, only on MSNBC.